What is up, all you beautiful, wonderful YouTube people? Eric here with Team Badman, and we are back with another edition of Table Talk, our series where we discuss cards and nothing but. And if you've been a viewer of Table Talk before, you will know that our first two videos in the series were completely about Set 4 during the release period for the Evolution set. Now, I covered in the original videos my opinions on both the Masteries that were being released as well as the MPs. And now this was before any testing was done, before any of the MPs were in hand and any of them had been used, and it was only speculation. So at the time, things were a little bit different than they kind of panned out to be. But now we're a couple months into the set. There's been a lot of mileage coming out of a lot of these MPs, some of the newer Masteries, and what I've decided to do is go ahead and revisit those. So we're going to take a look again at the new Set 4 Masteries as well as all of the Set 4 MPs, and we're going to see how things are different from the original speculation. So I'm going to take a look one at a time through all 6 Masteries and then all 8 MPs, and then at the end we're going to recalculate a list of where everyone falls from a best to worst kind of perspective. So let's go on ahead and jump right in, first with the Masteries. Alright, so I am going to go in the same order as the original 2 release videos in regards to what I'm covering. So when it comes to the Masteries, I'm going to go in numerical order as they appear in the complete card list for Set 4, which means we are starting with the Saiyan Rampaging Mastery. Now, as I mentioned in the first video, Saiyan was originally known for as a very fast, very beat, kind of aggressive anger sort of deck. And this was reflected by the fact that it can't MPPV if you're using the Empowered Mastery. What Rampaging did is Rampaging opened up the possibility of MPPV while still not limiting the anger gain, but instead changing it to a hit effect instead of an immediate effect. While this did kind of hamper some effects of MPs, particularly the Villain Vegeta stack, this still made it possible for more aggressive Saiyan kind of decks to hit, level up quickly, and MPPV. However, the big flaw with this is that not a lot of Saiyan cards inherently contain anger, which is something that I addressed before. And it almost kind of forces you to run some external cards that gain you anger, or try and find some named cards that are going to work that will gain you anger as well. Which, if you're looking for named cards to gain anger, this is essentially limiting you to Gohan and Vegeta in one way or another. This is also challenging because of how few styled cards actually net anger. There's left kick, there's spin kick, there are a couple of other cards in there that gain anger automatically, but they're not really enough to keep Rampaging on par with some of the other anger kind of archetypes, such as red, black, or Namekian. It also doesn't really help that the secondary ability is limited only to cards with automatic endurance. Not only that, but when you discard to the Mastery for an effect, it becomes a non-styled attack. So you can't gain the extra anger off of the Mastery, and it kind of slows things down, but it's useful for cycling cards out of your hand if you're not going to get mileage out of them anyway. One of the big perks of Saiyan Rampaging, though, is that it automatically reduces your anger gain requirement by 1 to a minimum of 4, which means that, unfortunately, it cannot stack with the Saiyan Analysis Drill unless you're playing against a blue protective deck. But nonetheless, having your anger gains reduced to level is a really, really valuable tool to have. The caveat here is that there aren't really any MPPV dedicated Saiyan MPs, not in the same way that Piccolo can be seen as an MPPV directed MP, or the Garlic could be seen as one in red, black, any other style. And it really kind of slows the new Saiyan Mastery down, especially compared to Saiyan Empowered. And it seems like in a lot of cases there's going to be an almost immediate preference for the Saiyan Empowered Mastery, since a lot of MPs are just going to want to level very quickly and get to those high value levels. This is no less true with the new Trunks stack, which comes packaged with the Saiyan Rampaging Mastery in the starter decks, who I feel gets much better mileage out of the Empowered Mastery than he ever would out of the Rampaging Mastery. This isn't to say that there won't be MPs in the future who could benefit from the Saiyan Rampaging Mastery and really kind of use that as momentum to an MPPV deck. You know, we've got Cell coming in the future, and he'll be able to use Saiyan style, so Cell may be able to get mileage out of it. Broly is an expectation in the near future, and it's almost certainly plausible that he will have access to that as well. So there's plenty of potential here that we could run into. However, for the time being with set 4, Saiyan Rampaging kind of falls behind the curve a little bit, and it really hasn't seen a whole lot of play just about anywhere as far as I've seen. I think for the immediate future, it's still going to stay that way. Next on the list is the Blue Tag Team Mastery, which when we first took a look at the set 4 Masteries, I said this was going to be probably the best Mastery out there in that it kind of defined the ally deck archetype. And boy was I wrong. The Blue Tag Team Mastery has a really nice immediate effect, and it lets you pull out an ally as soon as the game starts, and then it saves an ally from being removed by a critical damage effect if you only have one on the board. However, after that, it's kind of a dead mastery. It's completely dependent on if you have any allies in the banish zone, and if you don't, then it's not doing anything. In comparison to the Blue Protective Mastery, you know, you lose out on an immediate action, let alone a defensive action. Your opponent has much more propensity to MPPV, even with the presence of cards like Head Knock, Vehicle Destruction, Blue Takedown. And it's just really easy for an opponent to work around the strengths of Tag Team Mastery by using effects that are going to discard allies instead of destroying them. While there are combos to be found with the Blue Tag Team Mastery, say if you're using Hidden Power Drill or using cards like Blue Flight, it's still just subpar in comparison to just about everything else. It fell off really, really fast, and while there's still ally decks that can use it, and still plenty of possibilities for it, it's just not very good, especially when you compare it to the old Blue Protective Mastery. In a lot of cases, I think players would be more inclined to stick with the old Protective Mastery, use the ally cards, and just take the chances with having allies banished. Or you could just play Android 17 and be able to pull allies out of the banish zone using the Van, which seems to be a very, very common practice nowadays. So, in the long run, it didn't really live up to the hype that kind of showed out of the Tag Team Mastery, and compared to my original list, it's going to fall off really, really hard. Next here is the Namekian Restored Mastery, which, if it wasn't already known before, Namekian has had one of the best masteries in the game since the release of Set 1, and Set 4 is certainly no exception either. While it does slow down a bit compared to the original Knowledge Mastery with the loss of extra anger gain anytime the card is shuffled or rejuvenated. It gets an immediate 2 anger by using the effect right out of the gate, which means that it can still climb relatively quickly. It also has a phenomenal hand shuffling ability, allowing you to stack cards on top of your life deck at the end of every turn. It lets you reshuffle cards into your deck and draw, so you can filter out those bad cards in your hand and always try and keep at least some kind of presence available in your hand, just about no matter what point you're in. It's definitely shown work keeping up with the Knowledge Mastery in some competitive environments, and it's definitely showing that it's got what it takes to keep up, which is kind of expected out of a Namekian deck. And while it may not move as quickly as Knowledge, or it may not be as prevalent in the future as Knowledge, that doesn't mean that Restored is a bad mastery in any way. In fact, out of all 6 new masteries, it's probably the best. It has so much potential with not only current but future MPs as well. It has excellent synergy with the new Piccolo stack that came with it, and there's a ton of possibilities that this mastery has in the future. So while it was already high in the first video, it's definitely going to stay high up there as well, probably even bump up to the #1 spot. Up next is the Orange Adept Mastery, and when we first took a look at the mastery effects, I definitely didn't like this mastery. It didn't seem tremendously promising, mainly because of the loss of drills any time that you level up, which really put a hamper on it compared to Adaptive. But in practice, Adept has been a lot better than initially expected. While the damage buff may go from 1 life card on energy attacks to 1 stage on all of your attacks, that's certainly not something that you're going to miss. And the ability to pull out drills in the early game anytime one of your style attacks hits during combat is just super, super powerful. While you can only do it once per turn, nonetheless, it gives you really, really fast board presence, and it really lends itself to a physical kind of approach out of the mastery. While Adaptive was definitely geared towards a big energy beats focus, Adept not only gives you that physical edge, but it also really gave some power to a lot of weaker and less frequently used MPs. Nappa, Nail, Raditz, a lot of those quote-unquote less powerful beat-centric MPs have found a certainly new lease on life with the Orange Adept Mastery. And while it may not be, for the power leveler, and while it may not get the mileage out of cards like Devouring Drill right away, that doesn't mean that you can't get your board presence back really, really fast, especially with access to cards that get drills back out of your discard, like Orange Truck Lift or Orange Refocus. So it's really easy to populate your field once again with those powerful, valuable drills that you're really going to want to use and really aggress your opponent with. I think the primary reason that I didn't like it at first is because it came packaged with the Hero Vegeta stack, which not only didn't really have a lot of synergy with the Mastery, but it just isn't a very good MP stack as a whole. So I sort of dismissed Adept on the same grounds, but I'm glad that I decided to give Orange Adept a chance because it has really surprised me. And I think that in the future, as we get some more low-power MPs as opposed to the big heavy beat sticks, that we're going to see a lot of really cool and really exciting possibilities out of it. Hey Yamcha, I'm talking to you. Next on the list is the Red Ruthless Mastery. And if you remember in the first video when we talked about this, I was beyond pumped about the Red Ruthless Mastery. The possibility of shifting away from this very, very fast anger idea in red to turning it into a really physically aggressive beat stick kind of deck was really, really appealing to me. And one of the original decks that I knew was going to see a lot of mileage out of this was Turles. Turles sounded like a phenomenal idea in red when he first came out, since it both gave you a way to sort of jump those levels, as well as keep on some really, really nice aggression with his added damage buffs. And it's certainly gotten better with the Red Ruthless Mastery, as the community seems to have really, really picked up on. The added +2 damage buff to all your styled attacks is really powerful over the span of a game, and it causes almost immediate stage lock when combined with more powerful, higher power level MPs, or ones that get damage buffs like the aforementioned Turles. The ability to also cycle cards out of the discard pile and reuse them is absolutely ridiculous. One of the most common cases I've heard is the ability to reuse Frieza Supernova over and over and over again. But that certainly doesn't just apply to that. You can get back cards like Red Shoulder Grab or Red Shattering Leap, Red Mule Kick to remove some of those attached cards. You can get back cards like Overpowering Attack if you're playing Red Ruthless Ginyu in order to keep pulling out allies. There's tons of possibility with this mastery, and there's so much mileage that I think can potentially be found out of it. I have been enjoying playing Red Ruthless, and while Red Enrage seems to be one of the more popular choices in the local for us, I would love to see the Ruthless approach pick up in the near future and really kind of take off. It seems to have certainly gotten the mileage that I initially predicted, and, as some of the other masteries in the list fall, this one is definitely going to go up the list. It's one of my favorites still, and it seems to really be growing a following in the community as well. And lastly, we have the Black Perceptive Mastery. Now, when Black Perceptive came in, it had a really, really big challenge against it, facing off against the immensely powerful Black Devious Mastery. The added damage buff off of Black Devious is still phenomenal. +1/+1 to all attacks is great. And the ability to discard cards to make an opponent discard a card is just still so powerful. Being able to control an opponent to that level is fantastic. But Perceptive answered the one major flaw that Black has always had, and that is board control. The ability to take setups and drills off the board with every successful styled attack is just ridiculous. And while it may seem kind of understated, it really starts to hit home when you start losing some of those more valuable cards like Visiting the Past or Namekian Growth or some of your orange or blue style drills. It's really easy to pop those off and completely forget that the Mastery is even able to do that. This is even more likely to occur with some of the weaker attacks, like Black Chomp, or Black Refusal, or Black Dismissal even. It's really easy for some of these weak attacks to just slip through because an opponent thinks, oh, it's not going to be so bad, it's just a few stages, yeah, whatever. And next thing you know, they're popping off presence on your side of the board. While the secondary effect doesn't seem to be quite as effective, it's still really nice in the right kind of decks. 19 seems to be a case where this is actually extremely useful, since no matter what gets milled off of the opponent's deck with the effect, it's going to be an immediate benefit. You're either gaining stages, which is going to be valuable, or you're gaining anger, which is going to be valuable. It has a really nice mix of ability with a considerable amount of MPs, and I think the possibilities with it in the future as board presence decks kind of grow is going to be really, really valuable. Of course, for those who aren't running Black Perceptive, we always have Sinister Choke, which is going to punish those players who try and have big, heavy board presences. But for the rest of us who don't want to pay a bunch of money for them as they're going for right now, we've always got this Mastery. It's a pretty solid choice. I think it's slightly outclassed by some of the other Masteries, especially, when you compare it to the old Black Devious Mastery, which is still showing a very strong presence nowadays. And that is it for the Masteries, so we are going to revisit those later on in the video when we do a breakdown of where we feel that they're tiered at from top to bottom. And this time, it's time for us to jump into the personalities. So we are once again, like we did with the Masteries, going to go in the same order as we did in the original video, which means we are starting off with the big man Piccolo. Now, Piccolo already had a really solid stack to start with, and no case is more obvious than Piccolo's old level 2, which is arguably one of the best MP levels in the entire game. The ability to cycle cards out of the hand, rejuvenate, mill an opponent, and gain hand advantage all at the same time has an incredible mix in just about any Mastery that you can imagine, and it always made for a very daunting presence whenever Piccolo hit the board. You always want to prevent Piccolo from getting to level 2, since you knew that all they would want to do was really sit there and try and put as much pressure on you as possible. And with this new Piccolo stack, that's still the case, but in a very, very different way. Piccolo's new level 1 in lieu of an action gains extra anger anytime a card is rejuvenated and anytime that power stages are gained for Piccolo, which means that it's really easy to get off of level 1, especially if you're playing in Namekian style, but this also has a ton of synergy in red and black styles as well. The new level 2, while it doesn't have the immediate discard kind of effect, it gains an added physical attack for a really solid attack table +4, and it lets you pull out a styled card at the end of combat and either place on the top or bottom of your life deck. This is phenomenal for being able to grab important and valuable cards when you're going to need them, or just setting up for a slightly more defensive turn if you need to grab a really useful block. Piccolo's level 3 gains yet another physical attack, this time for flat 7 stages, and it lets him cycle out Dragon Balls to capture Dragon Balls. So it definitely lends itself to a more Dragon Ball-centric MPPV kind of deck. While his level 4 kind of foregoes the whole aggression possibility to prevent your opponent from using Dragon Balls whatsoever, which makes it a huge, huge threat against any decks that run even a few Dragon Balls, or try and capture your Dragon Balls by preventing them from getting absolutely any mileage out of them at all. Not only that, but you also gain added endurance equal to the amount of Dragon Balls that are on the field for all of your cards that have endurance. So it's really easy to flip over, one of those cards like Namekian Maximum Will or Black Foreshadowing and say, oh, okay, Endurance 8. And it makes it, really frustrating for more aggressive kind of decks to encounter that for the first time. It definitely lends itself to more of a defensive kind of utilization, a little bit more of a analytical sort of side instead of this very ramp up speed anger, especially when it comes to Piccolo's level 4, which also lets you pull Dragon Balls out of the banish zone and play them. This plays in really well with a lot of the evolution cards, which, let you banish Dragon Balls out of your life deck in order to advance levels, or they let you banish Dragon Balls outright, and it makes it really useful for a little bit more of a Dragon Ball-centric kind of deck, very passive defensive sort of approach. This can mix really, really well with the old stack as well, depending on what way you want to go. This is a lot more useful against decks that originally would shut down Namekian by either playing their own Dragon Balls or banishing them outright with cards like Black Corruption. So instead, you don't really need to worry about losing out on a win condition the instant the Dragon Ball is banished, or needing to utilize a card like Information Gathering in order to pull them back. This not only applies for your own Dragon Balls, but for Dragon Balls in your opponent's banished zone as well. You can pull Dragon Balls out of their banished zone and play them as if they were your own. So it makes it very defensively powerful against decks that are more Dragon Ball kind of oriented. And this poses a little bit more of a threat for Garlic, who is kind of known as a direct Namekian counter due to not only out-angering, but also running Dragon Balls as well, and doing so almost more effectively. It's not to say that this Piccolo stat can't be aggressive as well, where you could combine the new level 2 and the new level 3 with their added attacks, to the old level 4, who's got a phenomenal energy attack for 7 life cards, and really try and keep pressure on your opponent, especially if you stick on level 2, which is going to allow you to stack your deck with some valuable styled cards, and keep a valuable kind of hand advantage against your opponent just about no matter what they have. There's tons of potential out of this new stack, and it's definitely going to be mixed between the old and the new stack for some incredibly powerful potential. It's already seen a ton of mileage out in the circuit, and it's definitely going to pick up both with ARG coming very soon and any future tournaments that we may run into, even with future sets coming out. Next on the list is Android 18, who I was tremendously excited to see come out, and who has certainly gotten a lot of really valuable mileage as well. 18's power is almost completely centered around shutting down opponents' physical attacks, where every level at some point prevents modifiers on your opponent's physical attacks. While this only affects the first physical attack on level 1, level 2 prevents all of them if you're 5 stages above, level 3 prevents them all as long as you're above 0, and level 4 makes your opponent pay +2 stages for all of their physical attacks. This is all the more useful with 18's attacks, which don't do a lot of damage. In fact, they all start out at 0 life cards damage, but the hit effects are great. Level 1 lets you shuffle out your hand and draw the same number of cards. Level 2 adds a +1 life card damage buff, which is great for just about any kind of aggressive deck, which I think you're going to see a lot of with Android 18. Level 3 is virtually Trunks' level 3 with the old stack, which allows you to look at the top 6 cards of your life deck, put them back in any order, and then draw a card. And level 4 sets your opponent's power level to 0, leaving them essentially powerless to do anything. 18 certainly has tons of great potential, especially with an awesome set of named cards in Android 18's Toss, which lets you pull any Android named card, and Android 18's Armbreaker, which can immediately end combat. Now, the caveat to 18 right now is that there isn't a huge presence of physically aggressive decks out there. And even ones that are physically aggressive, they're generally limited to either Saiyan decks or the newly empowered Red Ruthless decks. So 18 really isn't going to get the kind of mileage that some of the other MPs in this set would currently do. That's not to say that in the future that 18 won't be a phenomenal choice, and that she still isn't even a phenomenal choice. I've seen 18 appear in Orange very frequently, where between Android Attack Drill and Aura Drill, it's possible for even her basic attacks that do 0 damage to considerably deal critical damage. And it empowers other attacks just all that much more, and it makes her a very, very dangerous threat. 18 has all the tools to be a very powerful MP stack both now and in the future. But currently, I think her primary purpose is a little bit underutilized due to the lack of ability to even use it. That's not to say that Android 18 isn't still a great choice right now, and it's only likely that she is going to grow all the more into the future as new archetypes open up and as the potential for a high-powered physical presence grows, especially with the future coming presence of the aforementioned Cell, Broly, Bojack. There are tons of other MPs who can come out that could really lend themselves to a physically aggressive style. And wherever those show up, 18 is also likely to show up and really put a hamper on their day. Next is 18's counterpart, Android 17, who I originally kind of dismissed for having an over-reliance on the van, which anyone who's played Scorzy also knew that the reliance on the car really kind of hampered Android 17. While this still is somewhat the case, 17 definitely gets a lot more mileage out of being an ally-centric deck, which you wouldn't really expect considering that his powers are more based on banishing allies as opposed to keeping them out. That's not to say that he doesn't have excellent synergy for other ally decks. Not only does the van banish out allies that your opponent may have, but it also pulls out allies of your own and keeps them on the field, which is great with some of the newer allies like Android 18, who can take cards from your hand and use them to perform non-style physical attacks, or Android 20, who shuts off endurance entirely. It makes 17 an all the more dangerous threat than he used to be, especially considering that, as of this moment, Android 17 has the highest power level in the game on level 4, sans Super Saiyan God Goku and Golden Frieza. Not only that, but he's got a very, very respectable set of MP abilities. Basic AT+1 attack on level 1, which lets you pull out the van. An AT+3 attack on level 2, which lets you once again pull out the van. A 6 life card energy attack on level 3 that shuts off allies from receiving or taking damage. And the damage cannot be prevented if the van is in play. And level 4 dealing extra stage damage based on the number of allies in an opponent's banished zone, as well as making physical attacks only blockable by physical combat cards. It helps quickly leveling Android 17's put on a lot of pressure against an opponent, and it's all the more enjoyable in ally deck combinations, such as with the Blue Protective Mastery, where you've got access to a ton of cards that help you pull allies out of the life deck. 17 has incredibly powerful physical beats potential, and that's definitely been seen in recent history where Blue Protective 17 has really kind of taken off. But that's not to say that he doesn't have good power in other styles as well. The Red Ruthless Mastery that he's packaged with is great. Orange Adept is an excellent choice. Black Devious is also very valuable. So there's a lot of open potential for 17. And I think right now, with the way the meta is shaping up, he's certainly going to end up doing better than 18 for the time being. But 18 will also essentially be a direct counter to the 17 approach if 17 ever decides to take off. So it makes him a little bit more challenging to play in lieu of seeing 18 come out. But for the time being, 17 is definitely a great choice and one that I would like to see even more of in the near future. If ally decks ever come out, he's got an answer to that. If energy-heavy decks continue, he's got a good answer to that. There's a lot of possibilities that 17 has got. I certainly underestimated him when he first came out, and he's been a great choice. If you haven't tried him in Red Enraged as well, I definitely recommend giving it a try, because he has a lot of fun when you focus on his Speed Anger approach as well. Next is the new Trunks stack, which is one that I was certainly excited to see come out. Trunks is one of my absolute favorite characters in the original anime and the manga, and when his first stat came out, I was really kind of underwhelmed, considering that he was very kind of focused into one style, and that was black. It's not to say that he was bad in that style, but compared to a lot of the other MPs, his abilities were sort of lackluster. And seeing this new stat come out with a little more of an aggressive bent is really, really exciting. His level 1 is a decent AT plus 1 attack, and if your opponent blocks it, then they skip their next action. His level 2 is a direct attack for 8 stages if you haven't used an attack from your hands combat. But level 3 is definitely the big key for Trunks. His level 3, as has been described, is VTP on steroids, where you get to pull an attack out of your discard pile, put a card from your hand on top and bottom of your life deck, and your opponent skips their next action. And there's a ton of combo potential here, which we have certainly seen here at Team Badman with my Saiyan Empowered Trunks deck, where you can cycle out cards that are going to force your opponent to skip their actions and just keep a whole lot of pressure on them. He rounds out fairly well on a level 4, adding plus 5 stages of damage to all of his attacks for maximum beat potential. This combines really well with a respectably good named card in Trunks' Sword Slash, which is going to deal a pretty considerable amount of damage, and depending on the style that you're playing, can open up your opponent to a really dangerous energy attack from just about any style. The disadvantage to the new Trunks stack, though, is that he doesn't really mesh well with either his old stack or one of his own named cards in Trunks' Sword stance, since that's relying on taking a look at the cards that you've got, and you can't really do that anymore with this new stack. If you're trying to mix the old stack and the new stack, you have to do so very selectively. I've seen a lot of players mix the old two with the remainder of the new stack, and that's a very respectable approach. Considering that between the old stack and the new stack, he doesn't lose any power scaling whatsoever. He scales basically the exact same way, which means he's going to deal a very considerable amount of damage at any level in the game. But it leaves him a little bit behind compared to some of the other MPs, since he's got only one good named card to use. That's not to say that he doesn't have potential in just about any style that you run across. While he definitely has legs in still black style and Saiyan style especially, he can run very well with the Red Ruthless Mastery or the Orange Adept Mastery. He could go for a bit of an ally approach with blue, and there's a lot of possibilities that Trunks could really run across. It's definitely an improvement over his old stack, and it competes very well with some of the newer stacks that have come out. But it's also very heavily dependent on a physical beats kind of approach, since that's really what he's focusing on. And this can definitely take him to some higher kind of tiers, especially if the physical beats takes off. But otherwise, he's a little bit pigeonholed into that niche. That doesn't make him a bad stack by any means, and he's one that I'm definitely excited to see, but he's not going to be a stack for everyone. Nonetheless, it's a very frustrating stack to encounter, as some of the players in our local here can attest, and he's a ton of fun to play. Next is Android 20, who not only surprised me, but I think a lot of other players by being arguably the best MP stack to come out of this set. As far as the show went, Android 20 was very integral in orchestrating the entire Android saga, as well as indirectly creating what became the entirety of the Cell saga and the Cell games. So he's basically the mastermind behind all of this. And his MP powers really kind of show that, giving him an incredible level of control with non-style drills. While there's still a limited number of non-style drills to work with, Android 20 has arguably the most key non-style drills available to him right now in Android Attack Drill, Android 20 Scouting Drill, and the immensely powerful Acquisition Drill. Not only that, but Android 20 has the potential to work in just about any kind of approach. If you want to go heavy beats, whether it be energy or physical, yeah, he can do that. If you want to go for a mill game, he's got that in spades. If you want to play a very defensive kind of game, Android 20 can do that, especially if you decide to camp on his incredible level 2 and just continue to rejuvenate cards. Not only that, but every level's got the ability to pull out his most valued drills. Level 1 not only allows you to pull out drills, but it costs your opponent stages as well, which has a lot of combination ability with other cards that came out in the set, such as Blue Face Grab, which doubles the cost anytime your opponent loses stages. Level 2 allows you to rejuvenate 3 at the end of any combat where you control a non-style drill, and if you don't control a style, you get to banish a drill on your opponent's side of the field, which gives him instant board control. Level 3 forces your opponent to mill equal to the number of non-style drills you control on your side of the field. And level 4 not only gives you an immediate Android 20 scouting drill off the MP, but it allows you to shuffle a non-style drill into your life deck in order to force your opponent to mill 3 cards. There's not really a bad level on Android 20, though I haven't seen a whole lot of players directly want to get to that level 4 because it seems kind of moot compared to level 3 when you've got Android 20 scouting drill out. But there's so much power to be found behind Android 20, and don't take my word for it, take a look at the Worlds bracket where an orange Android 20 won the entirety of Worlds. It's an immensely powerful MP stack and one that absolutely surprised me, but one that I know has caused a lot of frustration for players here in the local, and I'm sure has frustrated a lot of other players as well. It's a lot better than I initially gave it credit for, and it's definitely going to climb up the ranks as a result. Next on the list is the new Vegeta stack, and like a lot of other players that I know, I can completely agree that he's a lot more underwhelming than initially expected. While he does have some really neat interactions with the whole discarding card and just revealing it instead, and being able to change damage into stages and life cards back and forth, it doesn't really have a whole lot that it can work with right now, which kind of sucks because Vegeta's got some excellent tools at his fingertips. Vegeta's Gallic Gun is arguably one of the better named cards in the game, both not able to be endured and using dual critical damage effects, which has some really cool interactions, as is evidenced by critting off Kami and then capturing the Dragon Ball that Kami pulls out. And the newly released Vegeta's Destruction Blast, which can only be stopped by energy combat cards and has unique interactions depending on if the stack is hero or villain. That said, Vegeta really doesn't find his feet well in the early game, only able to change life card damage into power stages, which can help for more of a stage lock kind of approach, but there are other MPs who just do that better. Level 2 offers you an extra physical attack for 4 life cards, which is still fairly respectable, but it's not exactly terrific. And while he still keeps the converting life cards into stages effect, it doesn't really get kind of the mileage that you expected unless you're running in a style that has both combined stage and life card damage, which you really only find in Black Devious, which could make for some really fun interactions. Level 3 is where Vegeta really starts to pick up by not only adding back the reveal instead of discard effect, but allowing you to convert power stages into life card damage as well as life cards into power stages of damage. This can make for some really fun physically based interactions and could build on a nice physically aggressive kind of Vegeta deck, but requiring you to get to level 3 is a little bit of a steep cost to make it useful. His level 4 also has some really cool stuff. The first styled physical attack that you throw cannot be stopped, and the first styled energy attack, if it hits, allows you to pull a styled physical attack from the discard pile and place it into your hand, which allows for some really neat beat-heavy interactions in the later game, but that really doesn't make up for the fact that Vegeta isn't exactly a stellar stack as a whole, and especially compared to his villain stack, while the power stage brackets may be considerably better on the new stack, his old MP abilities are just so much better. While they both need to get to level 3 for maximum mileage, the +3 life card and +3 stage buff off of Villain Vegeta 3 is just too good to not take a look at, and having constant hand advantage off of an AT +6 attack on Villain Vegeta's level 4 just really kind of takes the wind out of Hero Vegeta's sails. Is that to say that he's not going to have some potential in the future? No, not necessarily. There could be some other really cool discardable interactions that you can work with. Some really interesting cards that could be released in the future. But for the time being, Vegeta really falls behind the curve. And it's probably going to keep him in the exact same spot as he was in the original video, which is at the bottom of the list. Next is the new Goku stack, which is basically the hero's answer to Captain Ginyu. This guy is all about allies this time, while the old stack was all about drills. So it really keeps him in a very specific niche. So you're not going to see him very often, but when you see him, you know exactly what you're going to expect. As expected from an MP like Goku, his initial level 1 ability is just kind of a poke to really play fun at you. It's an attack for 2 life cards and allows you to place an ally in play into your hand, and then if it hits, you get to place one on top of your life deck. So that way you're guaranteed to always have an ally available. This plays in really well with the new Vegeta ally, which you can play from your hand at any time in order to stop a physical or an energy attack. His level 2 is where things get really fun, adding an extra +2 life card buff to all of your attacks. And when entering combat, you get to choose an ally in play, and they are not able to be removed from play. His level 3 offers up, once again, a powerful energy attack at 6 life cards, slightly stronger than the Premier set's 5. But if it hits, you get to select an ally in play, and they can make actions regardless of Goku's power stage, which makes for a lot of really fun interactions available, especially with cards like Blue Kiss, which adds extra life card damage to the next attack that an ally performs, and I believe the damage cannot be prevented. And lastly, Goku's level 4 allows you to pull an ally out of any zone, place it into play, and then select an ally on the board who can make actions regardless of your MP's power stage, and they deal +4 life cards of damage for every action that they perform, which makes for some incredibly powerful interactions, especially in the right styles. In the same way as the old Goku stack, Goku is kind of narrowly focused into that ally-centric approach, but he does it very well. And he's also got some great power scaling in case you ever wanted to use a very physical kind of approach to Goku and really gain added benefit off of that +2 life card buff on level 2, or if you want to just really utilize the high power scaling and the access to some powerful attacks on level 3 and on level 4 if you run some attack-based allies such as Ten Shinhan or Yamcha. That said, it seems like ally decks really haven't taken off in the way that was expected when the Blue Tag Team Mastery was originally released. And compared to Ginyu, it seems like Ginyu kind of does it a little bit better due to having access to just some great ally abilities in all of the Ginyu Force members, as well as the incredible Frieza ally, which banishes out all damage, and Nappa, which shuts off setups, which is going to be something that ally-centric decks are really going to want to utilize. I originally ranked Goku very high on the list because of his value in ally decks, but seeing as how ally decks really haven't taken off in the original way that they were expected to, he's going to fall down the list somewhere. It doesn't make him a bad MP by any means, but being kind of stuck into more of an ally-based approach really is going to hamper him a little bit more in the long run. Perhaps in the future we'll see yet another Goku stack who's going to have kind of a different focus, maybe a more aggressive bent as we get into the Cell games or as we get into the World games. But for now, the Goku stacks are limited to doing one kind of thing, but doing it pretty dang well. And lastly is Android 19, who I originally kind of pegged in as the kind of redhead stepchild of the androids. While a lot of the other androids had, a really good kind of focus, 19's power being based, very much so around stages, made him a really cool candidate for, energy aggressive kind of decks, as well as being an almost immediate counter to the nearly ubiquitous Krillin, with access to cards like Android 19's Energy Absorption, which shuts off the immediate ability of any energy attack, as well as the excellent enhanced Reflexes Omniblock, which is going to banish named cards and prevent them from dealing any damage. That's not to say that that's all that Android 19 can do, though, is hate on energy decks. With a phenomenal named card like Android 19's Choke, which gains you an extra 2 anger, and the ability to keep on power stages, Android 19 makes for an excellent speed anger idea that, isn't the same kind of approach that you would see out of Piccolo or Vegeta or Garlic Jr. Not only that, but Android 19 has some really fun pokes that he can utilize throughout the game. Level 1 guarantees that your next attack, your next style attack will deal critical damage, and your opponent's next attack costs +1 stage to perform. This fits really, really well into Red and Rage style, where just about no matter what attack that you hit with, it's going to be guaranteed to give you an extra anger along with it, so long as it's styled. As level 2 adds an extra energy attack for 4 stages, and it enforces the extra +1 stage rule that you encountered off of the level 1. Android 19's level 3 kind of tempers down the stage gain, where as opposed to gaining stages equal to the number of life cards that you took for damage, you instead gain 2 stages outright. But he has the excellent ability to search out a card that can attach to your MP and place into play immediately attached. This gives access to, a bunch of phenomenal cards based in the style. You can attach to yourself Android 19's Energy Absorption, or any of the red attached cards if you want to get mileage out of those. You can search out Wall Breaker or Black Capture, and you can attach those to an opponent. So it makes for some really, really dangerous threat kind of combinations that make Android 19 all the more dangerous when he's really underestimated. And lastly, Android 19 ends on a very, very dangerous level 4, where he gains stages after taking damage from any attack, as well as an excellent, excellent physical attack that instantly puts Android 19 at his highest power level. And if you have a card attached to your opponent's MP, the physical attack deals an extra 4 life cards of damage and cannot have any of its damage prevented. Which means if you can get to that point in the end game, that Android 19 is going to be a tremendous, tremendous threat, especially when combined with his level 3 ability. Not only this, but he does have a great bout of named cards in Android 19's Choke, which also attaches to your opponent's MP, and Android 19's Energy Absorption, which attaches to your MP, which means that Android 19 has a veritable toolbox to work with to counteract just about any situation. That said, Android 19 is a little bit of a slow starter and really kind of needs to get to those upper levels in order to get the momentum really going. He can play in well to both anger-oriented decks and very defensive kind of decks, and he really, really puts a lot of pressure on the still strong presence of energy-focused kind of decks out there in the current game. Unfortunately, it doesn't seem like Android 19 really took off in the way some players expected, especially considering that energy-focused decks are still very, very prominent in the game right now. But that doesn't mean in the future that Android 19 won't have a very, very respectable place and isn't a very interesting choice to try out. And now that that is it for all of the MPs, let's go on ahead back and visit both the Masteries and the MPs, and let's re-rank everything compared to how we originally did. Since we hit them first, let's go ahead and start off with the Masteries again. And for me, I am going to almost completely re-rank the entire list. Starting at the top this time is going to be the Namekian Restored Mastery. Namekian is a phenomenal style. It might be kind of received as sort of slimy and very frustrating to encounter. But Restored took away that kind of grimy approach and made it an almost tactical kind of idea. Being able to recycle your hand at just about any point and being able to very selectively choose, if you want certain cards on top is really, really useful, while it makes it no less susceptible to the presence of powerful cards like Wall Breaker and Energized Strike to shut down its primary momentum condition. There's still a lot of possibility that you can run with the Mastery, being able to stack your deck effectively, especially when combined with cards like Pulverize, which could see a lot more play in a Namekian Restored deck, being able to really set up a hand to really put an opponent at a disadvantage.
It's got excellent synergy with just about any of the MPs who can play it right now. And it's a very, very fun option for those who are steering away from Namekian because of the grossness of the Knowledge Mastery. Next on the list, I'm going to put the Red Ruthless Mastery, which has certainly seen an upswing of momentum since the release of Set 4, as I had originally expected. It's a very, very fun mastery to play, very aggressive, and it has a ton of potential with a number of MPs out there in the game right now. There seems to be a lot of experimentation around Red Ruthless, and the success of MPs such as Turles and Captain Ginyu in the style are really attesting to its effectiveness. While it may have a bit more of a physical bent compared to the original Enraged Mastery or a lot of other masteries, it's really nice to see Red Mastery geared almost specifically towards that, especially in a current game that's very focused around a lot of an energy approach. So it kind of opens up a lot of potential for some of the newer MPs, and it makes things really, really fun to see on the circuit. It's certainly my favorite choice of mastery right now, and I'm glad to see that the momentum is picked up on it. It's an excellent choice, just no matter what way you spin it, and I'm very excited to see where a lot of the new ideas start going with it. Next on the list is the Orange Adept Mastery, who definitely made a major leap from its original standing at the very, very bottom of the list. It's got the excellent ability to set up board presence relatively early. It's helped shift Orange away from this big, energy-heavy, drill-focused kind of idea to a really pared down, sort of few drills, raw, aggressive approach, and it's opened up potential for a ton of new and old MPs to really do some exciting work. It's even more exciting to see in the future with access to cards like Orange Gathering, where we know that we're going to see some new and future MPs like Yamcha, Yajirobe, Chaozu, and seeing the possibilities that they could have in Orange Adept with access to drills like Orange Captivity Drill and Orange Distracting Drill really makes for some exciting promise out of it. It makes for a very, very aggressive bent to Orange, and it just makes for a fun kind of approach altogether. While I initially dismissed it as being really weak and not having the presence of Adaptive, comparing it on its own merits compared to Adaptive definitely made a lot of difference, and it's one that if you haven't tried out, I thoroughly recommend. Fourth on the list is the Black Perceptive Mastery, which is by no means a bad mastery. It definitely has a very, very valuable place, especially as board presence decks start to grow, where it can really kind of hamper on that very quickly. And it also lends itself to a bunch of MPs who may have wanted to fit into black before, but didn't really fit quite as well, such as Garlic Jr. or Dr. Wheelo. It's a lot of fun to play, and it has some really, really neat interactions with a lot of the newer cards that have come out, getting discarded off the top of the life deck to gain immediate effects. But it still faces very stiff competition from the Black Devious Mastery, which is still a very, very popular and a very beat-focused kind of mastery, and is one that certainly isn't going to be going away anytime soon. In the near future, though, I can definitely see Black Perceptive Mastery's play picking up, and I can see it being a very anti-meta kind of choice, especially against boards that love populating with very heavily defensive kind of ideas, working towards a very, very block-centric kind of idea. Blue Ball's decks will definitely suffer from this. Orange decks are going to suffer, especially Android 20, who's very focused around those drills. Red decks that like having board presence are going to suffer from it. So there's a lot of future anti-meta potential out of the Black Perceptive Mastery, which could make it a lot of fun to see. Next on the list is the Saiyan Rampaging Mastery, which hasn't moved from its original position at 5th on the list. And it's not a bad mastery by any means. It still maintains the anger gain potential out of Saiyan. And it has that built-in analysis drill, which is extremely, extremely useful for aggressive anger gaining decks. However, it just doesn't have anything to really work with right now. There's a distinct lack of anger-gaining Saiyan-style cards without that hit effect, which really slows down its momentum as opposed to the Empowered Mastery. And its discard effect, while there are some great endurance cards that you have available, it's not super great unless you've got damage buffs available from other MPs. That said, there could be some potential from MPs who garner immediate damage buffs, such as Turles, Nappa, or Trunks in the latter parts of the game, but having to rely on that for the discard effect to be really effective kind of hampers the approach as a whole. It's a little bit underwhelming for the time being, and while there's definite potential in the future, Saiyan Empowered seems to be the better choice to work with. And lastly on the list, with its great fall from grace, is the Blue Tag Team Mastery. I still feel like it kind of helps define the ally deck archetype, and it's going to be a very, very powerful tool for dedicated ally decks. That said, outside of the first turn ability, it really doesn't have much else. Especially with the growing board presence answer threat, it's not really going to get the kind of mileage out of preventing discard from a critical damage effect, and the ability to pull back an ally once it's been banished is okay at best, because you still need a way to pull it out of your life deck, considering that it's going to be at the bottom almost immediately. Otherwise, it's not great, especially when compared to the original Blue Protective Mastery, which it probably shouldn't be considering it's an entirely different mastery, but it doesn't have the strength to maintain throughout the remainder of the game. Outside of that first turn, like I said, it really doesn't have much, and while it's a really, really cool kind of novelty, it doesn't have the staying power to really make it a worthwhile choice over Protective. Now that we've got the Masteries out of the way, let's go on ahead and jump into the MPs and see where everyone stacks up this time. Returning to his place at the #1 spot on the list is Piccolo. And I know this may come as a bit of a surprise considering the immense popularity of Android 20 and his incredible power, and considering that I even said that he's probably the best MP stack in the entirety of Evolution. That said, Piccolo has one major advantage over Android 20, and that is a prior stack to mix with. Piccolo has arguably one of the best MP levels, as I mentioned in Piccolo Level 2 from the Premier set, and the ability to mix and match for just about any combination of passive play or defensive play or anything that you can imagine with Piccolo makes him a definite mixed threat that you could run into. Anytime you see an opponent pull out Piccolo, whether it's the old level 1 or the new level 1, you're really not sure what you're going to expect anymore. Especially dependent on the style, and it makes Piccolo a still dangerous threat throughout the entire game, especially with a nice mix of named cards. As such, that's going to keep Piccolo still remaining at the top of the list, and as a still present threat throughout the game for what's probably going to be a very long time. Next on the list, as should be expected, is Android 20. Who has an absolutely phenomenal toolbox utility and can be great as both a passive or an aggressive kind of MP. He's got excellent tools for any style, and he's got a very intimidating presence, as was seen at the Worlds Tournament back in December, as well as even in local or an Octagon play. While Android 20 may not be the easiest MP to play well, he is certainly a very, very powerful MP to have, and he's a very, very dangerous threat to see come out from an opponent. It's easily possible that he's usurped any one of the big three, and he's now replaced them as one of the top tier threats in the game, which shouldn't come as a surprise to just about anyone. He's a phenomenal choice, and he definitely deserves to climb up the ranks on this list. Third on the list is Android 17, who definitely surprised me as being a very powerful, very aggressive kind of MP. And he's got, just like Android 20, he's got an awesome toolbox to work with, while it may not be the exact same. He's got an excellent physical engine that he can work with his incredibly high power stages. He can use an ally engine very, very effectively, both banishing opponent's allies and being able to pull out his own. This provides for an excellent defensive buffer, being able to take stage damage, as well as screw over an opponent with allies like Android 20 in order to prevent the heavy damage that he can dole out from just about any of his attacks. While he may be somewhat reliant on the presence of the van to deal out a very considerable amount of damage and be the most effective, that doesn't make it a hampering tool by any means. And with so many ways to get the van out and maintain it, it's easy to see why Android 17 climbs up the ranks very, very effectively. He's a growing threat and a very, very dangerous MP to encounter and play, and he's only going to continue to gain momentum as physical decks and even ally decks begin to build, should they build in the near future. Next on the list is the Trunks MP stack, which is an absolutely great MP stack, even if it may just be relegated to that absolutely insane level 3. While he is a slow starter compared to some of the other MPs with an okay AT+1 attack that a lot of players are going to want to, not really kind of use right away, he's definitely got some great tools to work with, as well as a former MP stack that you can blend with to have some really, really fun interactions. He's definitely an aggressive kind of MP, which makes him a lot more likely to be seen in some physical beats kind of decks, but he can definitely play some very defensive approaches as well and be a very, very frustrating MP to encounter. Not only that, but he's got incredible power stage scaling, and at level 4, he's likely going to be dealing out more damage than any other MP that's out there on level 4. While he may not be the most prevalent MP out there at the moment, I can certainly see Trunks taking a very specific niche as being a great Saiyan-style choice, and even being a bit of a fun physical counter with his ability to force an opponent to skip actions and deal out huge amounts of damage at the right times. Next on the list is Android 18, who experienced a little bit of a fall from grace due to the lack of major physical decks out there on the circuit right now. That's the primary strength of Android 18, and the considerable lack of that means that one of the primary reasons to play her is not really seen very much. That said, Android 18 still has a phenomenal set of tools to work with, including excellent MP powers outside of the physical damage reduction, a great set of named cards, and awesome synergy with a number of different masteries that she can work with. It makes her a very, very dangerous threat to encounter, especially if she can get to her higher levels. But if she can be kept at her lower levels throughout the majority of the game, then it's definitely going to put a hamper on Android 18's approach. I still feel that she can grow with potential in the future, especially if the Red Ruthless and Orange Adept decks start taking off. But for the time being, she falls behind a little bit due to the lack of major physical presence. Next on the list is our last Android, Android 19, who I feel has some seriously untapped potential, especially in the speed anger route, whether it be in black or in red or in whatever approach you decide to take with it. His ability to shut off an opponent's immediate energy effects can really, really cause an opponent frustration at certain times. And the ability to apply attached cards, especially in styles like the aforementioned red and black, makes him an extremely frustrating opponent to encounter in the mid to late game. The reason he is so low is that he faces stiff competition from other more effective MPs, and the fact that he is such a slow starter in comparison to a number of the other MPs. If he didn't have the serious potential to run such speed anger with access to Android 19's choke, as well as very, very frequent stage gain to use some of the higher stage cost energy and physical cards to gain anger, it'd be more likely that he would run higher up in a more defensive, maybe a blue dominance kind of deck. But that's definitely somewhere that Android 19 is geared to, and he could be a very, very fun kind of anti-meta choice. Next on the list, falling probably the farthest out of any MP on the list, is the new Goku stack, which, like the old Goku stack, is very, very focused into doing one thing, but doing it very, very well. The ally-centric Goku can make for some really, really cool interactions, especially in the blue style that he came prepackaged with, but his high power levels can make him valuable in other styles such as Saiyan or Orange. The major caveat with this Goku is that he is very, very focused into the ally approach, and while the Premier Set Goku stack did have some potential with some other possibilities such as the red Drillku that has been seen or black Drillku, it's very unlikely that you're going to run to this Goku without at least one ally available in the deck. This really kind of pigeonholes Goku into having to work with that approach, and it's very, very easy to circumvent with the high access to ally and board hate that a lot of decks will find readily available. Could he make a valuable appearance sometime down the road? Absolutely. Is that likely to happen anytime soon with the prevalence of a lot of ally hate and his very, very limited scope? Not tremendously. And lastly on our list, as expected, is the Hero Vegeta stack. The Hero Vegeta stack, I really wanted to be excited about it, and it's exactly as I mentioned in the first video. I really wanted Vegeta to be good. I definitely enjoy his villain stack, and of course Team Badman is themed around Vegeta, so I really want something cool to come out of it. But his interactions at the current moment just aren't stellar. There's not a whole lot of cards that he can work with for the discard effect. He's required to get to level 3 for that real, card benefit. And it just leaves Vegeta, in comparison to other aggressive MPs, feeling really, really lackluster. I don't think I have seen anyone, really seriously run Hero Vegeta other than for a one-off match or just for fun at a tournament. And I think as long as we've got card interactions like we currently do, that it's not super likely that we'll end up seeing Vegeta really come out anytime soon. So that is it for our revisit of the set 4 Masteries and personalities. If you guys enjoyed it, be sure to click the like button down below. If you guys didn't like it, click the dislike button down below and leave a comment letting us know what you didn't like. We are always looking for feedback from you guys, always interested to hear what you guys have to say, and we're always looking to make the product better for you guys. We couldn't do this without you. If you haven't already, also be sure to click the subscribe button down below for more videos like this, match videos, some really cool one-off stuff. We've got some very exciting stuff coming in the near future, so be sure to keep an eye out for that. And lastly, if you guys haven't found us on social media, all of our social media links are down below. You can find us on Facebook, Twitter, and Twitch. In the near future, we may expand out to some other social media avenues, but for the time being, that's everything that we've got, so we would love to see you guys over there. So thanks again for tuning in, guys. We really appreciate it. This is Eric with Team Badman signing out. And like always, guys, stay bad. Thanks for watching.